Hello, I'm Jeff Jones, owner of RPG Ramblings. We publish quality game supplements for Shadowdark, Old School Essentials, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and Cephas Engine. Today, Shannon Appelcline, noted historian and author, joins me for an enjoyable ramble. His most current project is Dungeons and Dragons Origins. This book series goes through the history of early Dungeons and Dragons products and is on BackerKit. And I'll have a link in the show notes. Sisters and brothers, without any further ado, here is my interview with Shannon Appelcline. Hello, Shannon.
Hey, good to meet you in person or at least in virtual, Jeff.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, you're half a world away.
I am. I'm in Hawaii here. It is bright and sunny in early March.
It's always the sun always shines in Hawaii, doesn't it?
Surprisingly, no. We get the pretty awesome rain, thunderstorms, gray, but it's all part of the Hawaiian experience. I love the one as much as the other.
Yeah, having a range of seasons is nice. So, were you born in Hawaii?
No, I was actually born in Missouri. I have been heading ever westward most of my life. I made a 30 or 40-year stop in California for much of it, but I moved out to Hawaii 6 years ago now.
So, because I mean, Hawaii is largely, I'm assuming, tourism with maybe some agricultural is probably a large part of it. So, like, what like brings you that way? Is there
My parents, my dad and stepmother moved out here almost 20 years ago now. And so as things got on, we decided we would like to move out here to be nearer to them. And I think my dad was attracted by the nice weather, by the swimming, and by the more relaxed atmosphere here. So uh, California is a big, big input for people into Hawaii. There's a lot of people who vacation here and decide they do not want to go back.
Yeah, I heard that it can be both great, the relaxed atmosphere, and also frustrating for those of people who are used to a schedule and things happening in a short amount of time. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of what's called island fever, where people have had great vacations out here. They decide they're going to move out here, and then 6 months later, they're back to the mainland. Yeah,
yeah, it's trying to get things done. And I heard even like restaurants, people are kind of slow. It's just kind of just everybody's just like, it'll
yeah.
happen. Don't worry about it.
Hawaii, Hawaii time. You don't go to a restaurant or a store within 15 minutes of it opening unless you're totally okay with sitting around until they open the doors. And I'm on Kauai, which is one of the smaller islands, and there's other challenges here like getting gaming groups together and stuff, even more so than on the mainland. I mean, our population is 70,000 or so, excluding the tourists, but the tourists aren't usually going to be part of a regular gaming group.
Yeah, I think I may be wrong, but I think in general, gaming groups historically have formed, where a lot of Midwest where there wasn't much to do and the weather was bad half the year. So out of boredom, or I think in the larger cities, stuff to do, less people gaming. So I imagine Hawaii people are probably largely out and about and soaking up sunshine like sunflowers.
Well, we have started to get together a gaming group at our local library, which hopefully will work out. And I have been for a couple of years ago now thinking how much fun it would be to run an OSE campaign for some people out here.
So, so that's interesting. So what game are you starting? Like, what are you going to be? Are you running the game or are you just participating or are you a player?
Yeah, our library game, we're just getting people together for board games. And so we played like Reiner Knizia
Oh,
last week, this week, I guess, and other things like that. We got people out for another one called Railroad Tiles a month ago. But uh, the getting together a role-playing group, I think might be easier because I'm willing to run them. And so that's always one of the big stopping points for a lot of gaming groups.
so if you were to run OSC, what type of game would you run? What kind of campaign would you run?
I think nowadays it wouldn't quite be OSE, it would be Dolmenwood, which is
Yeah.
amazing. Uh, I got into OSE because I was writing my histories for Designers and Dragons, and Necrotic Gnome was on my list for things I wanted to write about for my newest book, The Tens. And I started looking through some of the products. I was like, wow, this stuff is very cool. I looked through Wormskin, which is where Dolmenwood first appeared, and I was just amazed, not just by the innovation, but the evocativeness of it right now. So when I finished writing my Necrotic Gnome history, OSE wasn't available at the time. It was during one of the periods where it was very hard to get the books. And so I was eagerly waiting for the Kickstarters to reprint them, and even more eagerly for Dolmenwood. So I think it'd be Dolmenwood right now if I started something new.
Well, I think what makes it interesting is it seems like it leans more heavy on history. I won't say history, but we'll say history and tradition, like mythological folklore tradition, and history being like British history.
Yeah.
You
I,
know,
I think that's a lot of what interests me about. I mean, my first real writing professionally was for Ars Magica, which, is even more so a fantasy game really in set in history and in mythic Europe, they call it, which is kind of a fantastic view of what maybe the average person in medieval Europe thought the world was like. And Dolmenwood does I agree feel very similar in some ways, except maybe cranked up to 10, 11.
yeah, it definitely has those sensibilities. It's less Tolkien and more just kind of like the various folklore stories and myths. As far as the vibe, I know nothing's like necessarily directly taken from that, but it just feels very much more like I forget the man. There's a mini series, Doctor Strange and Mister Novel. No,
Norrell, I think.
yeah, like it just has a creepy magic is just a creepy thing, and the world's kind of a creepy place, even though it's a real world. And I think they kind of do a good job of evoking um, less of the epic. And I think that's where I think sometimes it kind of gets old. Is a lot of D&D just is everything's on an epic scale, and same with Marvel movies. Everything's on the epic scale, but sometimes it's like more interesting when it's just things with a problem in a town.
Yeah, and that of course wasn't the original focus of D&D. I mean, a lot of people associated with the OSR, OSC, all Labyrinth Lord, all the rest, they're very purposely going back to that original sword and sorcery, a single person or a single group of people against supernatural foes. It was Dragonlance, 1984, really, that we only saw Epic, and that was a decade into D&D. It just has subsumed everything since.
Yeah, I think there's been like the layer the Queen of the Demon Web hits, and I mean there's been some focus on things that get kind of a little bit more out there. But you're right, most of it was even like with the Temple of Elemental Evil and Hamlet, it's all fairly regional stuff you're dealing with, even though it does have potential implications.
Yeah, and I mean even Queen of the Demon Web pit, which was 4 years before Dragonlance. Yeah, it had that planar scale, but still felt pretty sword and sorcery to me, fighting against a demon queen spider monster and her minions. I mean, that sounds kind of Conan-esque to me, except for being on the other plane.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. As far as that goes, I mean, as far as even like the stakes are, I guess even there the stakes. I don't know that she was going. Now I think about it, I think there was some weird plot with the giants that were kind of creating problems, but that was never. I don't know if it was ever really fully explained. It was mainly just going through and exploring and then saying, "Oh, something's evil. It's got
Yeah,
treasure."
it was a mess. I mean, Gary Gygax's original plan was to have the Elder Elemental God being what all of the Drow and stuff were worshiping, and the Drow and the Vault of the Drow were supposed to be the enemies to that, and there was supposed to be this conflict, but somehow it got misaligned by the time you got to the Descent, and then Dave Sutherland wrote Queen of the Demon Web Pits rather than Gary Gygax doing so, and so he didn't have any of the original plans or blueprints. He was like, hey, there's all these Drow worshippers. I guess that's what the finale should be about.
People have plans, but then like man plans, God laughs. But I'm sure there were things set up, and regime changes, and directions change, and personnel change, and all sorts of things come about. And I think from the consumer side. we don't see those things, but from the upper side, it's like there's a reason why things kind of wind up the way they do, and they're not necessarily according to the original plan.
Yeah. That's what a lot of what I was writing about in Designers and Dragons Origins, the books that I kickstarted last year with Evil Hat, kind of trying to unravel a lot of the what was really going on, what were the real plans, and it was pretty delightful to write about a lot of that because a lot I'd heard in little bits and pieces before, as probably a lot of us had, but getting out as much as you could, pretty neat stuff.
Well, I think we're at an interesting juncture, right? We're all, let's say, so we're at a point where we got to start, getting the records down from some of these people, at least the verbal records, that doesn't necessarily, equate to what actually happened back then. But, you know, those people are either, are getting older and some are, have died. So there's kind of a timeline, but there's also, I think, another section where we're older, we have money, we're interested in this. So now there's money, there's enough interest to make money doing that. So, and it seems like a lot of people who are now like yourself, you didn't start out saying my whole career I'm a RPG historian. You just have been doing, I think, this on the side, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
And so, but it all comes together. It seems like at this last 5 or so years, there's been an increase in amount of books and accounts and such that have been published.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing can't quite say renaissance, I guess flowering of role-playing history. And yeah, I mean, when I started it in uh, somewhere in the odd aughts, I started writing it online, and then the first book was 2012, 2003. Was totally stuff that I did in evenings, and I'd finish, eat dinner, and then I'd go back and I'd write for a couple of hours. Nowadays, I spend about 2.5 days a week on it, and so there's much more time to actually sit down and do it without having to eat up all of my time. And there's so many other good books by John Peterson and Ben Riggs and other people that it's delightful. A lot of times I've finished a book and someone else has finished one. I'm like, oh, there's some stuff in here that I wish I had that in here, but there's always the next edition.
Well, it seems to me that much of the stuff isn't even like what's what I'm looking for. You're not in competition. It's like everybody's hitting it from a different. I must say everybody's hitting, but it seems like people are approaching things from different angles.
Yeah, I mean, I really love the little society of role-playing historians there together, and we've done a podcast together, the other two people I've mentioned, and we exchange emails every once in a while. Someone asks, "Hey, does anyone have this reference or know about this thing?" I'd love to have more regular meetings and discussions, and it is great that it doesn't feel like it's competitive. And John does very academic stuff. He's I think, much more uh, thorough than some of the others of us. Ben focuses heavily on, interviews, and I focus on, hey, how can I look at the whole industry that's not just TSR, where most of their work has been focused on TSR. Um, maybe I might have felt more competitive when I was younger if I'd been doing it more then, but it is great at this point to really feel like these are people that were working together toward a common goal.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a hobby that I guess for we when we grew up, it seemed to me it seems kind of I won't say odd is not the right word, but it just feels odd we're at this point. Like it was a time growing up where it was not necessarily looked favorably upon by society in
Hmm.
general, and you know parents, older people are like, when are you going to grow up? And now we have people doing academic studies. I just find it, and I think what kind of validates the whole thing is just the amount of young people also getting involved in role playing. So and also I think with the video game development, there's a lot of like universities and such teaching. So it's kind of interesting where it's kind of become a very sideline, very I don't say maligned thing to now entering into an area of being, respected by a lot of people that are, I say academics or people that are in I don't want to say in higher levels of society, but there seems to be a strange change I would never would have guessed.
Yeah, I wouldn't have either. And I think it's because Dungeons and Dragons and role playing were always that kind of secret backbeat behind history. Those of us who grew up in the 70s or 80s. And so now there are celebrities, there are producers who all say, "Oh yeah, I play D&D," or "I play D&D."
Yes.
Uh, I think one of my favorite stories was, I think it was the Star Trek Discovery cast who, during COVID, they said, "Oh yeah, so and so was interested in D&D, and so they got us together to play D&D during COVID, virtually, I presume, so that we'd, kind of maintain our connections as a cast." And it's just amazing. Daredevil, Deborah, and
Wall,
yeah,
Wall.
she's been a big proponent of D&D too. And so it's just amazing to see people with platforms talking about that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think what's also happened is like the people who were, uh, at one time when we were younger, were the college students and high schoolers. They've gone on into Hollywood, become script writers and directors, and so I think as the taste of society has changed, they are also at that leading edge, being able to, you know, you know, kind of bring those sensibilities and help mainstream it.
Yeah, yeah, I think that we can't underestimate how much Stranger Things is impacting D&D's influence on society and probably will for a while into the future. Going back the D&D episode of Community, just it's all been out there in the mass media for a while, and that's really been making it more acceptable.
Well, I think too, it's like it helps normalize things, right? Because before it's like, what's really going on? I mean, you guys wearing
Yeah,
costumes and acting out weird stuff. And it's just like, well, you could be, but we don't. But it does go to show. I think it helps with any. I don't want to say we're a marginalized group, but it sort of felt that way. But I think anytime you can kind of, normalize a group that is people don't know much about and are suspicious of, it definitely helps to. I think it helps to socially help that group out.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And uh, certainly back in the 80s, it felt marginalized, and that was because of all of the, you know, misreporting and, outright lies and delusions that were in the mainstream from, the Satanic Panic to the people like Bad claiming that their children had died because of D&D. And so when that's all you get in the mass media, that's what people believe is true.
Yeah, and obviously, sensationalism sells. So,
Hmm.
and that helps to do it. Yeah, I think after having seen a number of things, as I've gotten older, I tend to be I'm more skeptical of anybody that tries to evoke strong emotional reactions on any particular subject as being, is this really true, or is this just a means of generating eyeballs and viewers? So.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the answer usually seems to be eyeballs and viewers. And one of the things that drives me the craziest is what I consider the downfall of journalism from, the 80s to today.
Yeah, and I think, part of it does seem like we have gone away from, this is what I kind of was wondering too, is like before, I think, even though undoubtedly people were biased, um, I think the idea was at least an attempt to present something in a nuanced or in a more neutral way. But then it feels like it's gone to, and I don't know that, you could probably argue that you can't be truly unbiased. There's always a bias, but it seems like it's gone to editorializing, and then that's kind of passing as journalism and reporting.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the people that I work with has been trying to figure out good ways to do statements of fact, things that you might, record on the internet in an unbiased way. And one of the things I think he says that makes a lot of sense is you can't do it in an unbiased way, but you report what your bias is.
Yes, yes, right. It's like, and I think the thing is, if you love a very biased news source, at least acknowledge it's a very biased news source. It doesn't mean that but to think that it's unbiased is very even though it may bias towards what you think and believe, but you need to always in the back of your mind think, well, you know what, they are definitely aiming for this type of agenda.
Yeah, yeah, he calls it fair witness reporting, and it comes from Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, which of course was from the 60s.
Yeah.
It shows how old these problems are.
Yeah, I think yes. And I think the problem is it does seem like both sides have had a tendency to point to one news source as being biased without recognizing that theirs is biased, or one might be a reaction against the other one being biased. So it's I don't know. I don't know when we get out of this. It's probably all tied to our human nature and we're doomed.
Yeah, probably so. Certainly feels like it many days.
Because it's like it's got to be tapping into something deep within our psyche as a people and the way we're programmed.
Hmm. Yeah, well, as some people have said, the world is burning down, and we're talking about elf games, but it's what keeps us from going crazy.
You know what? The thing is, ultimately, there's so much out of our control,
Hmm.
and I think there have been flashpoints in the last couple of years, some extreme flashpoints that we can find ourselves consumed by frustration, anxiety, and anger in a way that we just can't get away from it. And while I think we can't be ignorant, there's a certain point where it's like you can't live your life being angry or upset all the
Hmm.
time.
Yeah, that's certainly something I've gotten out of living in Hawaii, that everything
It's
a
like,
little less stressful. Yes, the world is horrible, but I can go swim in the ocean, and that's great.
there's a certain amount of isolation. You're right. That's all happening over there. It's like,
And it's important, but yes, it is more distant.
yeah, it's kind of interesting, but yeah, I think in general, that's why I do think besides just the overall anxiety and craziness and dealing with what we deal with, I think just the everyday thing is what it makes role-playing games important, is just doing some normal fun things with people on a regular basis.
Yeah. And that makes me think of a question that I've long had for you, which is uh, Gary's Appendix. You're getting ready to do the 10th issue, and I find it really amazing because it seemed like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe role-playing magazines were dead, and here you have a model for. I just kickstarted every 3, 4 months, and I'm curious where you came up with that and how well it really works on an ongoing basis because it sure looks from the outside like it's working great.
Yeah, I will say, so what happened was originally I wanted to do a different kind of zine, and I was also wanting to do a bestiary. So I thought, well, I could do a zine series, do a bestiary, and then collect it at the end. So that was kind of the goal. But then when it got time to when I had this thought of doing this thing and coming close to Kickstarter, like, well, maybe I'll combine this other idea and just have some articles because what I was thinking about doing originally was um, getting people who were, this is going to sound kind of strange, but I was trying to get people who had some sort of academic credentials and doing zines on historical locations and do write-ups about things that would bring those locations to life in a way that you could use them in a role-playing game. So like if you're from, say you're from like Sparta or from Athens or from wherever, just pick a time period in a city and say, what does it mean for a person to be living in that time? Like, what is religion like? What does it mean to be a good person? What is it? Because we kind of assume that, you know, we simplify things, and we think we also assume that, human beings, what they think of as what is good and what is noble is, transcends, but it doesn't. You know, the samurai has a different view of morality than the Mormon um, um, groups go around evangelizing compared to a Celtic person in like 300 BC or whatever. I mean, it's all different. So, but I realized that was not necessarily working out. So I thought, well, I'll just do some articles, combine them together, and then and it worked out well. And so apparently I got more people threatening my house. So that worked out. And so the idea was I tried a stable of people together to write. It didn't work out so well, but this one worked out real well. And so, but what I had to do is I needed to keep adding to my stable because people rotate out, because of life. And as far as success, I didn't really think about it. It has been reasonably successful. Um, it has been reasonably successful. In fact, I just did a search. Didn't I don't think it fully pulled it out all the Kickstarters, but I think I'm one of the as far as consistency. I think I'm one of the if you consider all the publications I'm doing, I think I'm one of the biggest maybe the biggest OSE publisher, really. Um, because I don't think anybody else is really putting out material on a consistent basis.
Hmm.
There's some big Kickstarters. So they've been doing good. They are solid. They perform. I'm not making like zillions off of them, but they're doing fine, and it shows that there's a pretty decent appetite. And what surprises me because when I compare OSE, so if you look at OSE, um, Gavin's really not supporting this much. There has been occasional modules that have come out, but they're really, except for what's coming out obviously with the Devils, but up until this point, there's really not been a lot of support, um, which I thought was
Yeah,
kind of
they're
interesting.
doing little quick dungeons and carcass crawler. I got an
Yeah.
art coming in from Exalted Funeral any day now, but it was 6 books or so from the last year or so, because most of it's been over on Dolmenwood, I think.
Yeah, and he should be. I mean, looking at what he's done, I think I've told people I think that he will probably take away. He could be nominated for almost every single Emmy and probably reasonably walk away with most of those Emmys off of Dolmenwood. So that's the right decision. What he's done is he's taken something that really wasn't his IP. It's just kind of a generic thing and has developed his own IP. That's Gavin right there, right? That's exactly like he's created this thing, and I don't blame him for that. But I think there's a lot of consternation from the OSR group because he's going to be combining the advanced rules with the basic rules, and people feel there's a loss there by him doing that.
Yeah, but of course we still have our old books, and I think he said that he's going to keep them available as PDFs, so anyone who wants that can get that.
Yeah, and I don't agree with their position, but their feeling was that when you mix the two, I don't know that anybody just runs. Tell you the truth, I don't know it really matters. I don't know if it's just a matter of I don't know if the end people's that are upset about this, it truly really even matters to them. Like if it would even functionally make a difference. I I think they see it as kind of a means of somebody coming in and losing a distinction. I don't know. I don't know.
It's interesting to see when you look back at the history, as I often do, what a really small period the strict retro cloning era was. You had Osric, Labyrinth Lord, and Sword and Wizardry, and they were all out within 3 years of each other. And even almost immediately after that, you were getting things like Lamentations of the Flame Princess, which not a strict retro clone, still pretty close, but
Yeah.
and nowadays when you look at the big OSR things, though some would not consider them OSR, it's like Shadowdark and Mothership and Mark Barg. Different people have different lines of what's there, and Dolmenwood, which are really stretching it a lot while still keeping a lot of old school play, but not necessarily the strict rules. And so I can see how there could be consternation, as you said, over the change from one to the other. But I mean, Labyrinth Lord, it was being reinvented in a second edition that, had new fairy classes and stuff. And, OSE, he's redoing it with advanced, and Dolmenwood also moves over to fairy classes. And so it really has felt evolutionarily to me. And like I said, I'm really shocked when I look back at how small a era the strict retro clones were, even though they really did define things for at least a decade.
Yeah, I think the sensibilities of paring things down is their greatest contribution.
Hmm.
And because that's what I mean, boy, it just seems like in the stuff that came out in the 90s and then in the early aughts was just, and people love large rule sets with complexities and all the mechanics, that's fine. But it just seemed like that's where everybody felt it needed to be heading.
One of my friends in high school was a real military nut. He went into the Marines for a very brief period. And the game that he brought out at one time that convinced me, no, we do not need complex role systems was Phoenix Command.
I I would play that at convention. I would love to play that at a convention. I would never want to run a campaign of that, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure we ever got far enough that we could figure out how a shot worked because, there were so many rules for exactly where that shot hit, how it hit, etc. But that's always to me the apogee, the top or maybe the bottom of, the complexity of rules.
Yeah, so like for me, it wasn't the most complex, but we played the Morrow Project,
Mhm.
and then they were coming out with a new edition, which I thought, well, this could be interesting, and I thought maybe it would be paring it down, but no, it was not.
Yeah, for some reason it's the military games that I think went hardest in that direction.
Yeah, and I think the thing is what I find very frustrating is that there's games with a premise that I just like. Moral Project. I love the premise, love it. The idea is especially for the. Are you familiar with the? Yeah, you're familiar with what am I saying? So the idea that you could be a recon team and that you could just be people part of the like I could be a dentist and another person could be something else. Something we're not really great at combat, but we're just kind of everyday people that have specialized skills that can be helpful to a society that's fallen apart. But the game's all about combat. Even though the premise is everything but combat,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, I've heard one of the creators of it, uh, possibly Tijolka, I'm not sure which, but he said, yeah, I always saw it as like the United Nations, not as, the army, that, you're trying to bring everyone back together, that it wasn't about killing people, it was about unifying. But uh, that's why system matters, as the article famously said. It's because the system that you create creates the gameplay, which creates the themes.
yeah, I mean, reading through all those rifles and, everything was based off energy, off of muzzle velocity. And, everything was, but like your dentist, what can your dentist do? There's nothing in any of the written adventures that talked about, you got dentistry, you're going to have an in with this guy. There's none of that.
Yeah, Richard Pajolko went on to do his own games after uh, Timeline fell apart, and one of them that he did was Fringeworthy, which was kind of this very Stargatey before there was a Stargate, where this big gate appears that lets you go into other dimensions. And the big catch in Fringeworthy was that like only 1 in a million people can actually go through or something. And so what that means is, again, you get the dentist, you get the dog catcher, you get the gardener, not because they are military, but because they're the people that could actually go through the gate. And so I think he was kind of doing the same thing in the Morrow Project, but he didn't have the excuse for it that he came up with in Fringeworthy, which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, I think the ideal system would to be use the new Twilight 2000 rules. and they've not opened it up. But I'd be very, 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 very tempted if Year Zero Engine opened up the ability to play in that playground of doing a like a Ruins of Chicago that you
Hmm.
know because
Yeah.
that had a neat premise. Just some weird stuff was in it, but that's a wonderful, wonderful premise of adventures. The is Ruins of Chicago, but anyhow.
Now, one of the dangers I run into being a historian of role playing nowadays is I research these games, and then I'm like, that's a terrific game. I want to buy that and I want to play that. And the Year Zero engine is one of those where it just, everything I've read about it makes it so evocative that I can certainly see why you'd want to use that instead of some of the older, cruftier systems from the 80s.
Yeah, it's yeah, and that's probably the one downside because about being in Hawaii because we live close enough that conventions are pretty
Mhm.
close, and I usually like playing systems I have not played or older systems I haven't played for a long time just to or maybe something I want to try out. So, but that's fun. But yeah, getting older now, I'm hoping to maybe be more intentional and free up some time and start going through the library and going through those games that I would like to play again or haven't played.
Yeah.
I think also with the other thing with the internet uh with professional GMs, there is a pretty good opportunity for that.
Yeah, certainly is. I've always leaned a little bit away from the internet play myself because it just feels like there's so much in person that you lose in that. But that was also more from the era where we'd like have one person move away and you'd say, "Can I keep playing in?" And so that's very different when you have a table full of people and one person on a phone as opposed to everyone doing it. But
Right. Well, for me, it'd be like, my opportunity to play Sky Realms of Draroon. That might be
mhm,
it. Or
yeah,
my opportunity to run a Rune Quest. That may be it. It's just like, but long term, yeah, it's the in person is much better for many, 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 many reasons. So,
but you're
um,
right. It's certainly the way to get in some of those old games. I mean, I'd love to run an OSE game, but I'd also love to run a Pendragon game. And an OSE game, I'm pretty sure I could get people to do on island here. Pendragon might be more of a stretch.
yeah, well, and I think right. I think it really comes down to throwing down the incandescent grottos is a blast. Anybody can join. You can have kids, you can
Hmm.
have older people, all of those experiences. Everybody have fun. But kind of like those Chaosium games, like Pendragon and RuneQuest. It's like there really is a commitment of at least a somewhat commitment to engaging in the world, and especially
Yeah.
Pendragon. Um,
Yeah, Pendragon back when I was running it, uh, they had a maybe 60-year timeline, 45, somewhere in there. Yeah, I think it was 5 eras of 15 years each. Um, and we never made more than 20 or 30 in a couple of campaigns I ran, but that's a pretty serious amount. But nowadays they go all the way back to Uther, and so you're talking about decades and decades and decades. I can't even imagine going through the entire Great Pendragon campaign. But they also just put out something called the Savage King, I think, which is a real sandbox, which I don't think Pendragon's really had before. And so that looked like a really neat intro to the game for me. Just, sandbox play. You go into this magic woods, and there's all kinds of enchanted adventures, which you expect because of the enchantment of Britain.
yes, yeah, no, it's and if I understand correctly, you play lineages, right? So that things will happen in the. Is there like so many seasons and your character's gone as the next person? Is that how that works?
Yeah, the theory behind Pendragon was always one adventure a year. And so you'd play your adventure, which might be a session or it might be several sessions, and then you'd do the winter phase, and everything would age a year. You'd maybe had romance during the game, but maybe you just roll it on charts at the end, depending on what your group thinks. You roll for children, and those children come up, and eventually your knight's either old enough that he retires or he meets a bitter end in the Grail quest or whatever horrible thing happens. And Then you start playing your firstborn, who, has many shared characteristics with your previous knight, but is also their own character. It was a pretty cool system. And when we did do it 20 or 30 years, we did get far enough that we could do that and kind of see some of the exciting elements there.
Yeah, and I think that's what's fun is, I mean, because Greg Stafford, I think, tried to tie it into, I don't want to say reality, but it's kind of a little bit more realistic as far as, you're not going on mission after mission after mission after mission, like a lot of but I think it also sets up a tone of like a thread of history. You're not just playing a person, you're playing the history of a lineage, or some things will be great, some things won't be so great. But it's great when people have created games that probably are outside, their thinking is outside the norm of what everything else is, and are able to present things in a way that the mechanics support the narrative that they're trying to create.
Yeah, I think Greg was a really great thinker outside of the norms. You know, often will say that Gary and Dave were the, parents of role playing, but that Greg was the weird old uncle. And I say that with the greatest fondness. I worked with him for a couple of years, but he came up with some from amazing ideas that, as you say, were totally outside the norm from, Pendragon and its personality traits and passions and lineages, to Prince Valiant, where you literally flip coins as the randomizer.
So when you worked, so you work for the Chaosium at a time? Because that
Yeah,
was
I
in
work
was that in your book? Was it Discord and Dragons? Is that the first series of books?
Designers and Dragons.
Designers Dragons, yeah, Designers Dragons. So did you talk about it in there about having worked?
Probably not. I try to keep myself out of the histories as
So
much as
so it was
possible.
maybe you talking to like Ben Riggs or somebody I was listening to. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I certainly have talked about it in the podcast, but yeah, I worked at Chaosium like 1996 to 1998 or something. They were flush with money from Mythos. They tripled the size of their staff Mythos collectible card game. They tripled the size of the staff. They doubled the size of their office, and then they overprinted Mythos and they laid literally every single person off or stopped taking pay except for me. And I decided I'm the only person getting pay here. I've been losing money the whole time I've been working here. Maybe this has been my, fun 2.5 years abroad, and I should be back in the technical field.
So, that's interesting because I mean, he's a key figure at a very important company, and you're there at a inflection point.
Definitely. I was sitting in my office trying to work as they argued over unpaid taxes and whether the company was going to go out of business or not. And, I was in my 20s at the time. It was like listening to my parents yelling about how they were going to get divorced in the next room.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine. It goes to show, I think, and because I got through three. I don't think there's four books in the series, right? With Designers and Dragons. So I think I
Mhm.
got to the. Did you do a fifth one?
I have a fifth one that I will probably be sending off to Evil Hat in a month or two, and a sixth one and a seventh one. But the
Okay.
fifth one you're probably thinking of is the tens, and that's one of the ones that's going off. The
So yeah,
other,
so I think I've read the first three. I need to go back and go through those. So I think what's interesting, what you're, I mean, what I think what's interesting about what you're showing, kind of like with a lot of these others, is that as companies or people, it's like people can be very smart, but it's the business decisions that people that just because they're good at one thing doesn't mean they're good at running a business.
yes, I would say paired problems that the role-playing industry has had since its inception, what I call the dragons of the books, are designers trying to run companies when they don't know what they're doing, and business people trying to run companies when they don't know what gaming is. And so, you know, you would think one of those answers should be the right one, but they have both led to bad places for companies. And we've mostly stuck with designers running the companies, and that's occasionally been successful and often been not.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's it's very tricky, and I think the other thing too is if you're running like a lawn care business, it's pretty clear what you need to do, and it's probably fairly stable. I'm sure it has its ups and downs, but boy, riding the market and well, and I think especially for like me, I'm riding the market, right? So right now, I'm not a trendsetter. I'm just in the wake, right? But the people, trying to be up front. I mean, that's there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of energy. It's not easy being in those positions.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about Gavin's Kickstarters, and he hasn't done a lot, but Dolman pulled in like $1.2 million or something. Just the idea of that much money going in and out, I think that would make most of us a little nervous about getting it right, and you know, not necessarily wanting to be in front of that moving bus.
Yes, because yes. So yeah, for people, so like for me, my risk is generally pretty low.
Mhm.
Um, because but like with Gavin, I'm sure he's mitigated and he already knows probably a base, but but he's has a lot of books in production, so there's a lot of costs. There's a lot of people he owes before there's even a print run, and even then, there's a certain point where you need to lock in your print run. You gotta kind of give him some numbers. I mean, if this Kickstarter were to go flop, I mean, it would have been, or if that Kickstarter would have gone flop, it would have been probably horrifically bad.
Yeah. And I mean, he's through absolutely no fault of his own, almost stumbled over some of the problems in the industry. He got all of his books from, must have been a 2019 Kickstarter, one of the reprints for OSE, and they hit the warehouse in Britain in like February 2020 or something. And then all the international shipping shut down, and they just sat there gathering dust for like 4 or 5 months. And then he couldn't ship them properly even after that because of Brexit. And so, those are just some of the, big problems that we see that, like I said, through no fault of his own. And, obviously he did great and he managed it all, but there's probably a lot of publishers who wouldn't. And so, yeah, when you're out there on the front, it can be very dangerous.
Yeah, and it seems like he may have a small. I don't even know if he really even has a staff. I think he really manages his organization like very tightly.
Hmm.
So he's not kind of like some of these others, just I made $1 million. I'm gonna, hire this person, this person, this person. It's like it just feels, and the things I've seen when I look in the books, he's doing the layout. I mean, he may have some people help, but I mean, he is doing a lot of that work himself. Not all of it, but for all the products, but he runs. He's not doing a lot, but he's doing a lot of the work himself, and even managing this the Demons OSE um, thing that's coming up. I mean, he's the one that's spearheading that whole thing and answering questions and setting up spreadsheets. So, that's it speaks a lot to, and then also producing content. I mean, he is a very remarkable person.
Yeah, and the new backer kit months for things like the Demons month for OSE are
Yeah.
just amazing things. I think Mothership was the one that was the first one out, but it's just such a neat expansion of crowdfunding, which has already done so much for the industry.
Yeah, Goodman Games has done it. Also, it does. I was kind of skeptical, and I'm also be participating in the backer kit program, and we'll see how it goes. But it's there's one part where it's like when it's one thing if like OSC is coming out with a product and there's like like 5 or 6 people additional, but when there's like 20 people additional, like and you're like, is this going to dilute? Like, would I be better off just doing this myself? Would I be better off doing it right before, right after? But we'll see. But I think historically, at least the guy I do a lot, that does a lot of work. I work with Zach. Historically, those do better. He says those those mass programs.
Yeah, Zach Goins, I presume.
Yes, yes, yeah. He's yeah, he's a very prolific person as well as far as content and being able to do a lot of different things. But yeah,
Yeah, you'll of course have the stats to be able to see how does, number 10 with demons do as opposed to number 9 and number 11 down the road.
so yeah, so this isn't tied to that. So this is
Ah.
so what I actually have are two. Well, this is I guess get in the weeds now. So the Kickstarter or the backer kit, the crowdfunding is being fulfilled. Okay, so Exalted Funeral is doing fulfillment for the OSE demons, and the way it's working out is we're all like partnering with having our backer kits go at the same time with as the OSE campaign, and then we're allowed one SKU to send to Exalted Funeral. So so if we anything we want fulfilled through them, there's only one SKU. We can do whatever we want as far as our own projects go, but we can have multiple books, do whatever we want, but it's not going to be fulfilled through them. So it's there's a little complexity to this, and trying to wonder how it'll dilute, but so we'll see. But no, the purpose of this one is the of issue 10 is to get people hopefully ready and aimed at, or it's that way, I don't know, aimed at that. So it's my pitiful attempt at marketing. We'll see if it works.
Yeah. Well, certainly as a OSC fan, when the demon month hits, I'm likely to go in and choose 3 or 4 that I like. And so, yeah, there might be dangers of dilution because I'm not gonna be buying all 20. So it will be the 3 or 4 that stand out probably.
Yeah, and I think in general, the other thing I have found over time is that in general, if you offer things at higher tiers, price tiers, people will buy those. And sometimes it's like, somebody says, you know what, I'm excited about OSE, I'm excited about demons. I'm going to just have a grand old Kickstarter and I'm going to enjoy all these books that are coming my way, and they will spend the money. There's a number of people out there like that. And
Yeah, there are people who will go through and buy the whole set, and I'm
yes.
curious what percentage that is, but I certainly see on social media people say, "Here's my stuff I got this month," and they show their 20 role-playing products or omnibuses or whatever. I'm like, "Whoa, how did you afford that? How will you ever read all of that?"
Well, I think a lot of those people I'm going to guess demographically, they're all older men who've had careers, towards the end of their career. Their kids have grown, or they don't have all those responsibilities, and they've got good jobs. Their houses, they're probably, so I'm sure that's probably a lot of it. But so anyway, it does work. It's just earlier when I started the business, I would think nobody's going to do this, but then I find out, or if I offer something a $60 tier, who's going to spend $60? It's like, well, I guess people do. So I can't base it on what my thoughts are. So no, that'd be a good thing. I'm not sure because I know Gavin at one time was supposed to be doing a post-apocalyptic,
Hmm.
and that's never. But of course, it could just show up one day. We don't know, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's on his current list though, but I do remember him talking about it. And I also the new version of OSC that we were talking about earlier, it kind of goes against that planning because his whole original theory was I split the game into these 5 books, and then you can just swap out any book. You keep the core rules, but you put in a set of post-apocalyptic,
Yeah.
or you put in the post-apocalyptic treasures and monsters, etc. And if they're not split into those 5 books anymore, except the old PDFs, you don't have that interchangeability. But then he decided Dolmenwood would go entirely its own way. So that might just say if he's going to do it, he'll do it as a standalone game. But
Well,
have
I don't want to say it had to, but looking at some of the things he did, he just had to break. He had to break with it
yeah.
just doesn't make sense. There's things about OSE that make sense, like, having ascending and descending armor class and putting THACO in there. It's because you just want to give all the OSR people the options.
Mhm.
But when you're doing your own game and your own, you want to say, you know what, I want clarity. I want to clearly provide my vision, and I don't need other things that don't really matter. If you're playing Dolmenwood, you're playing Dolmenwood. You know, you can use your OSR stuff, it still works, but I'm not going to, have to feel that I need to have all these stats aligned to the same formatting, that we've done for the last 50 years.
Yeah, and I think Dolman would almost absolutely has benefited from that. I think most games would benefit from that.
There, yeah. So looking at it, so because of what he did, I felt with the Denizens of Blood Sands, I rearranged stat blocks. I didn't change anything, but I definitely felt the ability to just like say, you know what, I'm not going to worry about the order. I'm just going to put in the order that I want because it makes sense. So no, it'd be interesting to see because I was also surprised with Doman with the amount of material that was released.
Hmm.
Like I am like I don't think I could ever play through it all. It is that was a fantastic value.
Yeah, I agree. I very happily got in on the Kickstarter too. And you know what? It was the three main books, and then we got like four books of adventures and a map, and that was all just the basic level.
Yeah, and the thing is, it still astounds me. I need to go through. I don't know if he wrote all the. I mean, some of the adventures I think were already written, but in general, like for the amount of content that was written, like I'm just astounded.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons Dolman would interest me is something to run because I know there's so much content there just waiting to be run, and it's all, that same high level of evocative and innovation that we've seen since Wormskin.
Yeah. I likewise want to run it. I just need to. I don't know. There's so many games. That's so many
Yeah,
games.
there are.
So I guess for those, I'm not sure everybody knows, but you started out as far as your histories go to for like history. Did you start out with Drive Through RPG doing write-ups? Is that how you started this whole thing, or did it go back before then?
It went before then. I was my boss I was working for at the time, who was running an online game company, happened to end up with ownership of RPGnet through some weird. It got bought out by a .com company. They never paid for it. We gave them a server so that it would not suddenly die out. And then he later said, "Hey, let me buy it from you since you were trying to sell it already, and I'll actually pay you." So my boss ended up with RPGnet, and then I ended up overseeing the site. Mostly meant I did programming. And managed our columns, our reviews, and that type of thing. And so something that was constantly in my mind during that period is how can we get more content? Because, this is the mid-aughts, late-aughts, and we're already starting to get blogs in increasing amounts, and they're kind of drawing away a lot of the people who were just thrilled beforehand in the 90s because we would publish their content. But they could do it themselves now. And so my idea, being a writer back as far as I can remember, was, well, I'll just produce some of my own content as kind of a sample of what we would like to see. And I was interested in the history of a company called Imperium Publishing, who did Traveler very briefly in the 90s under Ken Whitman. And yeah.
Does he get his own section?
He kind of does because in my new books of the Lost Histories, I talk about two of his later companies, Archangel and Dynasty, and so there's now like three articles about him spread out across two books. But anyway, I researched it. I figured out what had gone on with him. I said this would be a great thing to write, and then I put it to the side because there were all kinds of discussions of whether someone was stealing money from the company or not. I talked to engineer who'd been working there, who was also working with us on our online game articles. And she said, "Oh yeah, there was definitely weird things going on there, and I didn't know what to do with that." And so I ended up publishing one on Wizards of the Coast history because I thought, hey, here's one that'll be popular. And I totally killed RPGnet the night I put it up because it got slash dotted, and I said, hey, there's interest here. So that's where they started. The drive-through RPG articles. Those were what I call company histories because they were about Wizards of the Coast, Imperium, many other companies. The drive-through RPG articles came when I was finishing up my version of the books for Evil Hat, and the folks at Drive-through RPG said, "Hey, we just got relicensed to sell Dungeons and Dragons PDFs, which had been off the market for 5 or 6 years at the time because Wizards of the Coast was worried about piracy and somehow thought that removing the official copies would make piracy go down, which, obviously it had the opposite
Yeah.
effect. Um, and they said, we'd like you to write histories for those. And so that was after I'd been writing histories for a few years, and they were aware of my work, which is why they were interested in these. So my original company histories became Designers and Dragons, which have been out for over a decade now, and I've got some new books to supplement them, and then I'm going to start working on a third edition that combines everything and updates it all. And the product histories that I wrote for all of these PDFs that Drive Through RPG published have become Designers and Dragons Origins, which is currently a 4 book set of product histories for D&D's products from AD&D First Edition, OD&D, and the entire basic D&D line all the way to its death. And so those are 8 different books in 2 different series of 4 each.
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea of the individual products, that's what's fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of history with a lot of those different modules and whatever supplements, and there's a lot, a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm continuing on. I finished up last week, I think, my first draft of the second book on AD&D second edition, which we're not going to offer for some years. But those first edition ones and those basic D&D ones, a lot of them had really intriguing histories about them. Like we talked earlier about the GDQ series and how it changed. And there was lots more like that spread out through the early ones, kind of before TSR became more corpocratic and more likely to just hand down adventures that people had to write based on titles and covers, usually, that came in before anyone started working on anything. And so, kind of the second era has less of those neat origin stories, though there's still plenty of interesting things of stuff have evolved. But the AD&D stuff, a lot of it's great, fun history.
So there's also companies, obviously, that have sprung into, I don't want to say just being, but even prominence, like the Arcane Library and so forth. Is there like how do you? I mean, because now it feels like you're on a track, right? Like you're. It feels like your vision may broaden it a little bit, but you're still like there's it's like almost like I would assume you know what you're going to be doing and you're seeing things transpiring as like these are early stages of other things. Are you are you like are you planning on, I'm assuming you're planning to keep on doing these types of histories, but I mean, how do you handle like these newer companies that are popping up?
Yeah, it's really, really hard writing things so close to the present day. And so when we did the second edition with Evil Hat, that was when we divided Designers and Dragons up by decade. We had a decade on the tens, and I was writing this in 2012 at first. We kickstarted it, I think, in 2013. Um, and so I barely had any any time to say, hey, what are the trends? Because those couple of years, not really enough. And so like the Tins book almost entirely misses the OSR. And that's because it trended back to D&D third edition, but it was a fan a trend until the very end of the odd aughts when we got Osric and Labyrinth Lord uh, and Sword and Wizardry, and Labyrinth Lord in particular went into stores because Dan was really focused on that, and Black Blade got Osric out in a similar way. but that we're into the tens by the time that's happening, which is when I'm writing. And so it was really easy to miss that type of thing. And the new Lost Histories I have a section I really love about, kind of the five fundamental ostrich companies of the odd aughts. But similarly, I'm sure there's stuff I'm missing in the tens, even though at least this time I've got 6 years on it as I'm closing out on my tens book. But one of my big tools was Kickstarter. So I wrote about everyone who I thought was big and important, just kind of based on what I see on social media, what I see in forums. And then I went back to Kickstarter and I said, okay, what companies are there that are hitting $1 million that I'm not including? And I didn't include any of them, but like Hit Point Press, I put in. They're doing some interesting, really artistic, focused D&D 5e books. And so I was like, oh, yeah, they're put in. And I think I would have hit them anyway, just because I'd heard about him, discussed him on podcast with various people. But the Arcane Library and Tuesday Night Games, who of course did Shadowdark and Mothership respectively, they both went in that last phase too. When I went through the $1 million Kickstarters to make sure that there were big ones, and so that's been a tool, but it's tough.
Yeah, because Arcane Library, if I understand correctly, I mean they published, I think we're a fairly successful small publisher of D&D fifth edition supplements, and
Mhm.
then I think pretty popular, but was able to a second, but they were able to once they did the Shadowdark, they just blew up at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Arcane Library had brilliant marketing. We were just talking earlier about how designers often don't make great business people, but the Arcane Library is one of the most thoughtfully run, small to medium press that I'd ever seen. They were jumping back and forth between DM's Guild to get themselves attention and self-published products that they put out through their website, and it really worked well for them. And I think they also did a lot of community building to make sure that Shadowdark was going to have the audience before it actually came out.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, and I'm assuming there's also more than just this with Kelsey Dionne, but she just seems to have like grew herself to this moment. Like, if you meet her, I don't know if you had a chance to ever meet her, but like, and I've seen her interactions, like she has like the maturity, she has the personality, she has it's like everything converge at the right time for somebody to be doing, what was being done with the Arcane Library.
Yeah, I mean, it sure didn't help that Wizards of the Coast tried to pull the rug out from under the OGL right before she'd planned to do her release. And I think because of the really careful marketing work that she'd done previously, that Dark was going to be really successful, whatever happened. But that has to have helped too.
Yes, no, it's I really do think that that her company would be a good uh not for our history, but just a good way of studying how they grew and did what they did. I mean, it's
Uh,
like I think a lot of times people think that, whatever field it is that people are um lucky or whatever, but a lot of times it's people working hard, putting themselves out there doing things, and then moments arrive, and then they're there and they're ready for it.
yeah, yeah. Kelsey, I definitely would never say was lucky, and that's why she succeeded. I have done my best in the history of the Arcane Library, which is in the tens, to really point out the amazing marketing and thoughtful how to grow the company that went into it. So hopefully it will be the exact blueprint for hey how someone did this very thoughtfully and successfully that you were talking about.
So what things are you like, what things excite you as you've done the histories and you're seeing things? I mean, what, like, I don't want to say you can see trends going out, out to the vanishing point, but I mean, but I guess the thing is what you're seeing. What sort of things do you find kind of exciting and fun and promising?
I love how big the role-playing industry has gotten. And I don't just mean successful. tall. I mean how wide it's gotten. You looked at the odd odds, and you had three really segregated segments. You had maybe four. You had, the mainstream publishers. You had the indie publishers who were, doing a lot of things outside the fantasy science fiction norm and also really experimenting with uh, game systems to resource management,
Yeah.
things like that. And then you had the OSR. And nowadays, it doesn't feel segregated anymore. It feels like they've all kind of combined and each offered their strengths, and that you have a field that's much wider as a result. And yeah, D&D is always going to be the big game. Fantasy is always going to be the big genre. But I mean, you look at itch.io, and there are thousands, tens of thousands, more games than you could ever possibly even read, let alone play. And yeah, they're all very small press, maybe many of them are only seen by a couple of people, but it's just one microcosm. You look at the various community content sites that are on Drive-Thru RPG right now. And there's just so much content being created on the DM's Guild for D&D, on the Johnstown Compendium for RuneQuest. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I was a big member of the RuneQuest fandom community like in the 90s, and I thought it was amazing at the time that we had like six fanzines going or something like that at the very height. And now people are putting out these bulky, 200-page full color books, which, if they do well enough, they get to put out a pod of it. And there's more of those coming out every year than I could possibly buy. And so it's not just the breadth of what's being created, but also who's creating it. And they've all just gotten so much bigger due, mainly to a whole bunch of technological advances. So that's all amazing.
Yeah. I think the barrier to entry is much lower to producing quality books.
Yes. Yeah, it's you say that and I just find it so interesting. I talk about this in the history books a lot, how the barrier has just wavered so much over the years, You look back to the 70s and you could just throw out a, photocopied book and it would sell, and then the barriers went up and up. And then in the odd odds, you had this D20 explosion where, yes, you had to produce higher quality books, but you could put them out and you could sell them. And again, now the barriers are way down due to pod, PDF, drive-through RPG, community content. All of it lets, almost anyone produce really high quality books, things we couldn't have even imagined. I mean, even in the 80s when things were mostly still black and white, it's so different from that.
Yeah, and I think the flip side of it is and I think for good and for ills, I think the expectation is also higher now.
Mhm. Yeah.
So before, where somebody could just with a typewriter crank something out and it was perfectly fine. Now, the expectation is, glossy cover with a professional image and professional typesetting and so on and so forth. But you're right. It is a fantastic age. And what I find fascinating is that there was a time back in the odds I thought this was it. But I thought, what, it's okay. Role-playing games is dead. I've got the hero system. I've got a few other things. I don't need anything else.
Yeah.
What else can I really even need? And it's like, man, the direction that games have taken, and even in areas that like I don't care about, but I'm excited that people are exploring.
Great. Yeah. And some of the early books that I saw in the Johnstown Compendium for RuneQuest, they talked about how, oh yeah, we do have art every, 4 pages or whatever, but it's all public domain art. We've just, worked with Photoshop to, color it, shade it, that type of thing to make it look more modern. But it didn't necessarily have to be expensive, and they could still produce, best-selling books like that.
I believe you can produce great looking books without without having like super snazzy graphics, but you got to be smart and you got to think about it. And it is possible to do things when you don't have the money, but it's also you need to have somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
But you can put out great products that look great without having the latest and greatest art. Yeah, public domain is a great way of going.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the OSR books, they've found a lot of their success, particularly things like OSE and Mothership, just in superb graphic design. I mean,
Yeah.
the control panels, as I've heard people call them, of OSE, where everything's arranged on two-page spreads, those are just amazing for reference, but they look really good too, irrespective of the amount of art in them.
No, those are good. I think it's kind of interesting. There was a challenge put out by Questing Beast. I forget his name.
Ben Milton, is that
Yeah,
right?
Ben Melton. I was going to go to Ben Riggs. I knew that was the wrong guy. I just couldn't shake Ben Riggs out of my head. But he kind of made a comment, made some comments, throwing shade at about Goodman Games and their formatting and which created a big firestorm, and he had to kind of publish another video. But it's just kind of interesting how formatting and that people take odds and people have very strong opinions when somebody states their opinions. So I
I'm
don't know.
pretty sure Milton's the one that came up with the phrase control panel for the OSE double page spreads too. So
Yeah, I
maybe
don't think that anybody needs to be enslaved to that, but there are some sensibilities that come with it that should be embraced.
Mhm.
You know. But anyway, that's probably for another podcast. And I just want to say I'm thankful you wrote an article for me for Gary's Appendix 10.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. You said, "Hey, we're doing this as a prelude to the Demons month," and so I thought, well, what can my first thought was, I could write a history of, BX demons. I thought, no, I really like to make things that are playable. And I said, what different basis could I come up with for demons? Because demons as seen in AD&D at least are very regimented. But, I've also seen kind of different mythologies created, say, by DC Comics, who, have a very complex, relation of many demonic entities. And so I started digging through, I think Wikipedia was one of my first references, to what other ways have people ordered demons over the years? And I came up with I think it was a Dominican inquisitor who saw them all as tempters, and they tempted different things. There was one type of demons who tempted people to murder, and another who tempted them to say bad things to their mom and whatever else. And I thought that seems great because you can kind of put demons in the background and have them be these manipulative forces who are tempting other people to do evil things. And that sounded like a lot of fun and something pretty playable. So that's what I put together for you.
Yeah, and I think I agree. I think there are so many different creatures that are just seen as something you stab, where they're much
Hmm.
more interesting when there's something maybe you can't directly stab, and maybe they're a problem in an indirect way. It's not something you just, go to the last room, kick open the door, and
Yeah, that was
hopefully you could stab them quick enough.
Yeah, that
So,
was almost exactly my intent. So I'm really happy it came through. I have run a lot of Pendragon over the years, even if I haven't recently. And I'd always try and look for what's the moral dilemma here. And I literally would sometimes have my players on the verge of tears as, they were facing this moral dilemma where it was like, do I have this bad choice or where do I have this bad choice? And, demons as tempters really seem to fit into that because yes, there's this guy who's doing all of these bad things, but is he really responsible for it himself? Or are you just, killing him and someone else is going to step up into his place?
yeah, yeah, not that could parallel real world issues.
That's exactly what I thought when I said it.
Yes, no, I agree. No, I agree. Yeah, I was wanting to. I when I was doing the OSE omnibus, the Gears Appendix omnibus, I needed some pages. I thought about asking you to write a forward or something to it, uh, but my page count, I, I was kind of panicking about page count because it was getting towards the end, and you have to do. Anyways, a lot of stress. So I decided not to add one more stress. It's like, well, if I ask you how many pages you write, how many pages do I need? What have you go? It's like, no. But I thought, maybe I'll just ask you to write an article. I'm glad you were willing to do so. So
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I do so much history writing now that it was really great to actually do something that was game design.
yes, yes, yeah, you're right. It's like you're cooking in a Mexican restaurant, but it's like you do great Mexican food, but it's like, yeah, I'm tired of Mexican. It's like I did it all day at work. It's like,
Yeah.
about how about something different? So yeah, so you got some sounds like you got some continuing on the series on the horizon. Is there anything else you're wanting to talk about?
The only thing that really is probably of interest to people at this moment is Designers and Dragons Origins,
Yep.
which is my 4 books of product histories, like I said. We did the backer kit last year, and so it is now available for pre-order. My editor gave the layout artist the last set of changes a few days ago. The layout artist has finished them, and so the editor just needs to check them. Gosh, it's nice having an editor who does that so that I don't have to do it all myself. Evil Hat is so good and professional on getting the books done right. And so you can still go to the backer kit page, just search for Designers and Dragons Origins, and it comes up, and you can pre-order the books. They're available as PDFs or pods. They're full color. They're about 400 pages each. Some of them are as low as 368 or something, but they're in that range. And like I said, they have a history of every single TSR, OD&D, AD&D First Edition, Basic D&D, all the way up through the Mystara books that got published for AD&D Second E. So that's the most current thing. And my Traveler history is still pretty current. This is Free Trader Beowulf, which was a book that I wrote all about the history of Traveler, and that's out from Mongoose. And the 50th anniversary is coming up next year, so it's very topical.
Yeah, I should pick that up. I have a lot of affinity for traveling. I don't necessarily get to play it that much, but man, the it has been a fantastic game. So that's fantastic. So yeah, and those the Design and Dragons Origins. I mean, those are full color books. I mean, they look very lush as far as to the eyes. So
Yeah, the graphic artist, Chris Viana, I think she did an amazing job on them. My jaw dropped the first time I saw them. They look so good, and a lot of it's, original graphic design for how can we make these chapter heads look really nice? How can we look the contents page look nice? So it wasn't just, dropping in the content in a regular format, though there is that too. There is just a lot of, like you said, kind of luxurious work that's I was really pleased with.
yeah, and until you try copying what somebody's done, it's not always easy to tell just how hard it is to do. Because really the best layout and the best designs are usually people who are extremely thoughtful. And when you try and analyze it, if you're not that level, it's like it is truly astounding to see people operate at those levels.
Yeah, I
And glad
mean,
they got somebody worthy of the work that you're doing to, I mean, you put all the work and energy into the words. It's nice that it's also presented in a way that, treats it, that same kind of gravity.
yeah, it's really nice. And I did graphic design layout when I was working for Chaosium in the 90s. And my work, I would say, was workmanlike. And so it makes me much more appreciate the amazing job that people have done on a lot of my work, but particularly Origins.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Well, thanks for joining me. I'll have to have you on again sometime.
That would be terrific. It was great talking and always happy to.
All right. Well, you take care, Shannon.
All right. Thank you, Jeff.